Today is going to be just a discussion generally about dealing with difficult people in the workplace. So bosses, coworkers, maybe even employees. Probably not, though. Mostly just going to be ragging on bosses and coworkers and just talking through both sides of it. So one side is, how do you deal with it if people have those behaviors? And then how do you not be a person who has those behaviors for other people? So how do you not be the difficult person yourself? And how do you deal with people in the workplace that are difficult? And, some of the most difficult situations are situations where you feel like there's an imbalanced power dynamic where it's either a boss or somebody who has greater influence who is annoying or difficult, and you're trying to overcome that, being able to deal with that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm noticing that for some reason in this, like I swear, when I'm looking at myself on YouTube, it looks like I'm wearing makeup or something. I'm not. I don't know if there's some sort of weird filter going on here. Let's see here. All right, we're gonna gray it out a little bit. That's definitely better. Yeah, I feel much better now. I know everybody was worried about that. So, all right. So let's just start with it. Concept is difficult people. I actually want to go through anybody who's willing in the room here. I'm going to call on some of you, so you're unwillingly going to have to. But if you feel like speaking up, speak up. This is actually one of the questions I ask a lot in interviews nowadays when I do a job interview with somebody. So the question is, what are some traits in other people, traits in people that you work with that you find very difficult to get along with? So we'll start with Chad, because I was just talking to you. So Chad, what are some traits in coworkers, in bosses, whatever, that you find it, not customers. We're not talking about customers and customer service here. This is about people in the workplace. What are some traits or characteristics that you find difficult to deal with?
Pretty much just with coworkers, or like not anyone in general, but it's just when they feel like that they have more power than you, when we're all doing the same job. They feel that they can talk to you a certain way when it's just like
right. So condescending.
Yeah.
Condescending, egotistical, self-aggrandizing, maybe the type of person who takes credit for things that they shouldn't be taking credit for, doesn't have like a team ethic, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty spot on, honestly.
Okay.
But, I'm not a confrontational guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get angry. I've always just kind of, you don't sign my paychecks, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And kind of, I don't let it get to me.
Yeah. No, and I've experienced that with you. You're not somebody who escalates, but that's actually part of the challenge with sometimes difficult people, when you are a little, maybe not non-confrontational, but you're not intentionally confrontational, is that sometimes if you don't want to cause problems with people, you got to have some tools in your toolbox of how to communicate with people in a way that that mitigates it, because we can't always choose exactly who we get to work with. Hey, there's Eric. How you doing, Eric?
Greetings, sir. How we doing?
Good. So it looks like you're on a roof right now. Is that right?
We are on a rooftop right now, finishing up this install today.
Okay. Okay. Eric was the planned guest on this topic. So I don't know how much you'll be able to be here, but we were just talking through traits and characteristics of people that we find difficult to work closely with. So I at least want to get that from you. What are some, because we're always talking both sides of this equation, how you deal with people who are difficult, but then also identifying in ourselves characteristics that make us that type of person that other people find difficult, and mitigating that. So what are some traits that you find difficult of people to work closely with?
Sure. Whining.
That's a good one.
Whining. Number one cause of difficulty in our world is whining and complaining.
Yeah.
No one likes that. Everybody has hard days at work sometimes. whining and complaining about that is not helping.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. I listened to a recent podcast, and it's a good one for anybody who's looking for podcasts that actually will help you with your life. It's called No Stupid Questions. It's with Angela Duckworth, who is the author of a book called Grit, which is a fantastic book on just general success. And they were talking about this topic of complaining and why complaining is so rampant in the workplace, and why, in some ways, complaining has become a cultural norm to the extent that it's expected. And so one of the examples that they give is the common enemy. That's a really common type of complaining. So you talk about the boss, like, so your boss, oh man, that guy drives me crazy. That guy's such a jerk, right? He's what a clown, or a customer, or you complain about, even the weather, whatever it is. You complain about it. And so you feel a commonality because you're both experiencing the same thing. And when you get the goody two shoes who says, well, I don't know, I think the boss is a good guy, then people are like, oh man, who's this guy? He's a butt kisser or whatever. But if we can look at the seed of what we like about complaining, what we like about it is actually community. We like unity of experience. And so you can do those things without being a complainer. You can find ways to share experiences and to be on the same page, on the same side of the desk with someone is a good way that I've heard it put before, rather than sitting opposed to them, without becoming a complainer or not doing that. And I don't know about you, Eric, but I have certainly struggled with that over the years myself.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Especially when the boss man makes you work on a roof, when you're supposed to be doing a podcast. Stuff like that.
Well, today was a little bit of a unique situation. We had some logistical hurdles to overcome, but we're getting it done.
Okay. It wasn't crane related, was it? It always seems like it's related to the crane.
No, surprisingly not this time. So this time it was related to this crazy curb adapter that we got. It's like a double offset trapezoid, the kind I'm talking about, where the new rooftop
goes every
is offset
direction
90
at once.
degrees from the old one. And
yeah,
so we couldn't fit it on the trailer, so we had to make 2 trips. And of course, the supply house takes an hour to load you up every time you go back, and so here we are.
Yeah. All right, cool. Any other top tips before I let you mute yourself and get back to what you're doing?
Yeah, I was going to mention, I actually prepared a little bit for this podcast. So it's kind of a bummer I'm still working, but
well, we'll do it as this is a live stream, so we'll still do a real podcast, just you and me.
Okay, cool.
On the topic. So you don't have to lose all your preparation, but give me some of your top stuff.
Yeah. So one thing that I found is you're always going to have the difficult coworkers. There's just nothing you can do about it. Just like bad weather, they're always with you. You just can't let it get you down. You can't let it ruin your day. You can't let it, whatever. So with the last difficult coworker that I had, my whole mantra was just ignore it and keep working. Ignore it and keep working. You can be miserable all by yourself, bud. And, that I don't have to give you rent-free space in my head just because you want to be miserable.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's a good one. And I think we're again pointing at that. Sometimes it's complaining, whining, griping, general unhappiness, sharing your unhappiness. And I think a lot of people want folks that they can commiserate with, people that they can talk to about their problems, but that's not what work is for primarily. And it's not to say that you can't, it's not to say that you can't be close enough to someone that you can share some things that are going on in your life, but you really got to keep that to a minimum in the workplace. And I think you're exactly right. The way that you communicate to somebody about that is about refocusing on what you really have in common, which is the proper execution of the work and the service of the customer. And that is a really good trait of leaders in an organization, whether it's, field leaders or whether you're in an office environment, whatever the case may be, where you can redirect to the common goal. We call that missional thinking. What is the mission at hand? What are we focused on here as a mission? And that's what I'm hearing from you is that not allowing somebody else's junk from get you off of your mission, or whatever that is for that particular day.
Yeah, that's right. And I like to do this visualization thing, and I think we talked about this last time we talked in the office, Brian. I visualize myself hanging up my tool bag on the mailbox when I get home, and then picking up that tool bag from the mailbox when I go to work. And that way there's the separation of, if I'm having a difficult time at home, that sort of reminds me to leave it at home. And if you're having a difficult time at work, leave it at work. So that way it just kind of helps out in both environments.
Yeah.
Helps to keep you focused on that mission, like you said.
Yep. And that's actually another good way of putting that. A lot of people talk about work-life balance, and it's actually one that Bert and I talked about a while back, and I want to do this one again at some point. Mental health is another really important topic that a lot of people are talking about. But I think sometimes folks get confused because they want everything to be flat. They don't ever want anything to go wrong. They don't want any relationship to be challenging. They don't want And that's what they start to believe that mental health looks like, or having proper work-life balance or whatever, where everything is just always smooth. But that's not how it works, right? Sometimes you're going to have a tough situation at home, and sometimes you're going to have a tough problem at work or a tough relational dynamic at work. And that compartmentalizing isn't saying that you're a different person both places, because you're not. That's impossible. But what you are doing is you're focusing on the task at hand without letting baggage from other things to get in the way of that, which doesn't serve anyone. So it's a really good, it's a really good way of thinking about that. And I like that idea of hanging the tool bag up. I haven't always done that, but even if you just identify, and I say actually want to even just identify a spot that you kind of anchor to emotionally. That's one thing I've always liked about having a long commute, or I have my 30-minute drive into the office, and it's always kind of helped me to clarify my mission for the day and to be really clear about that. Hey, Rapcan's here. Whoa,
Hey.
you got like a beard cut or something happened. You shaved. I'm not sure what happened there, but that's intense. I mean, you're looking good. He's connecting to the audio, so he's not even hearing a word I'm saying. And I'm saying all this stuff about him, and he can't even hear me. Anyway, all right. So I'm gonna move through my list now. So one of the first things is, and this goes back to what Eric was saying, is that being able to point to something. Whether it's the place that you mentally hang up your tool bag, whether it's having a really clear mission for the day or a really clear long-term mission for your career, having those things will help point you in a direction that can eliminate the distractions. Because ultimately, what difficult people in the workplace are, I'm going to try to kind of start here. What difficult people in the workplace are is a distraction from what you're wanting to accomplish. And so even if, because some of you will say, what are you talking about? This guy's the guy who owns the company and is a complete, I'm trying to think of a complete, I can't think of any words to say that are G-rated. So he's a jerk. Okay. How can I still accomplish what I want to accomplish in my career if the person I'm working for is such a vile person, whatever you're thinking it is. But that's actually perfect example of that, because if you are clearly focused on where you want to get in your career, then you're going to decide, is working for this person and gaining the experience I can gain while I'm here, is that working towards my career goals, or is this a distraction? Is it working at this place a distraction from where I'm headed? Because that may help clarify that maybe this isn't the place to work. Maybe I'm working here because it's nearby, or I feel some social connection to it, or maybe the money's good, or whatever the case may be, but maybe that isn't actually working towards your goal. And so you always have to have that in mind. And that's a healthy thing. A lot of people feel disloyal thinking about whether or not where they're working is actually best for their career. But that is actually a really healthy thing to always think about, is, are you doing what is best for you and your family? Really best, long-term best. And if you are, then focus on those small incremental steps that are going to get you there without getting too hung up on the distractions that negative people bring along your way, or difficult people bring along your way. So I want to skip to Corey. So Corey, what are some traits or characteristics of people that you find it very difficult to work with or for?
There's several, but I guess the one specifically in leadership positions that I find a little irritating is inconsistencies. And that could be, that gets into a gray area of, you kind of touched on like mental health and stuff like that. It can be related, or it might be or might not be related to mental health issues. But inconsistencies in management lead to, I feel, a lot of unnecessary stress for the workers, the other employees, and just general does not lead to a very well functioning organization. And so if you have a group of people who in a particular department or whatever that are trying to work towards a common goal, more or less it helps to have at least somewhat consistent behavior or expectations,
Right.
To achieve that. So inconsistency is kind of,
so like erratic behavior. I'm just trying to peg down what some things would be with inconsistencies, like where one day they expect one thing and then the next day they expect something else, disorganization of thought, that sort of thing.
yeah, exactly. As well as attitude or,
Right.
just in general, you kind of want to have at least me, for example,
Right.
I like to know what's expected on a day in, day out basis and go from there instead of, oh, well, this day is something different. You're acting like everything this way is fine this day and then it's not the next. And
yeah. And also maybe being moody just in general. I think moodiness is actually, it's not one that I have on my list because it kind of gets collapsed into a lot of other things, but it's a really negative trait in all of us. And it's something that I definitely struggle with. I mean, a lot of the ones that we've already covered here, moodiness, whining, complaining, those are all things that I do struggle with at times. And it does send mixed messages. And when you send mixed messages to people, you get mixed results, and you ultimately cause frustration. So that's a really good one. We'll do one more. Let's see here. We'll see Josh. I don't know if you can you hear me, Josh? I haven't heard from you yet.
Yo, I'm here.
Hey, all right. So what are some traits or characteristics of people that you work with that you find difficult? I mean, not necessarily currently, but it could be currently. Could be me. Heck, it could be me. What are some things that you find challenging?
Listen, Brian, you're too funny.
I know. All my friends tell me that.
Let's see. It's just crawling out of an attic.
Everybody's still working.
Hang on. Dang.
No pressure. There's just 130 people listening to you. No biggie.
Yeah, honestly, I like Chad's point, and Corey's point just now was pretty much what I would have immediately jumped to. It's finding inconsistencies in people when we've been doing things a certain way and everything's been holding good, and either they want to change it up and things start to go wrong, or they want to change it up when you have been doing it a certain way and maybe they're just not feeling it that day. And now you've got to take 2 or 3 steps back to recover. And, so I definitely feel that whole inconsistency thing, but realistically, everybody goes through it. Everybody deals with it day in and day out. And we just do our best as good people to try and, keep the ball rolling. So.
Yeah. And that's actually, so I had a business coach for a while, and a lot of the things that I've learned in terms of, just full disclaimer, a lot of things that I've learned in terms of how to communicate with people in business, and I still have a long way to go, but came from him. And one of the things that he said in terms of leadership is that Nicholas is raising his hand. So we'll go ahead and unmute yourself, Nick, and I'll get to you in just a second. One of the things in terms of leadership is the realization that a lot of leaders, they think they're helping, but they're actually just interrupting. And after they get done interrupting, people just go back to doing it the way that they were doing it before, because there isn't clarity. People get used to bosses who he used to call it spinning. They come into the room and they spin a bunch, and they create a lot of distraction. They create a lot of discontent, and then they leave, and then people just go back to actually doing what they were doing before because they have a much better idea of what's going on. And I think, to partly what you're saying there, Josh, I think there's a couple different things. So inconsistencies, of attitude, of expectation, of all that is one thing. But another thing is just not being not providing people with clear structures where they can do their job the same way every time. Because a lot of people value that. Some don't. I don't. I would rather do something different every single time because I get bored so easy. But a lot of people actually prefer to know how to do their job, do it the same way every time, and they don't like having, wrenches thrown in the mix all the time. And so recognizing that as a leader is really helpful. Go ahead.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Josh.
Well, just to finish it up, I guess, as in the perspective of a helper, especially, and I totally get where you were coming from when you were saying you like to switch it up too, because it helps you keep learning. Definitely as a helper, understanding the foundations first, and then formulating new ways to do things as you go along. So that's practically where I'm at.
Yep. No, it's good. And it's been very good for me to work with somebody like Jesse, who is much more just do it this way. Like it just stick with the same way, keep tweaking that process. Don't keep switching things up all the time. It's been very helpful to our organization with somebody like him, because it does help quite a bit. Go ahead, Nick. I can't hear you. Now you're going to get in a wreck. Now your microphone's not even working at all. You're completely muted. Nobody can hear you. There is good news though, that Bert is coming into the room. So that's good. That's good stuff. All right. So I'm just going to start walking through my list until Nick gets on. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Any other characteristics that you just want to get off your chest? Anybody who's here in Zoom?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
You know what?
Go ahead,
Who's
Chad.
that? Oh, you
can hear?
Oh, that's Nicholas now. But go ahead, Chad. Chad will finish, and then we'll get to Nicholas. I can hear you now.
I find it difficult too, like just, within the leadership category, I don't really know actually what category this would be, but, you have your tasks to do and you're working on them, and, you got a lot of things, you got planned to do, and, that person is just constantly going on like, oh, you like, have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? When are you going to do this? It's just like, I'm going to get to it after I, do my things. It's like, well, it's got to be done, so stuff like that. It's just,
yeah,
you're gonna get to your stuff, but when they keep going on about you got to get it done, but you're just so busy with other things that you can't get to it right now. It's
right.
It happens a lot.
I found that so irritating. I'll tell a story about that in just a second, because that was something I found so irritating. And then as a leader, I've become that same person sometimes. So yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. Go ahead, Nick.
So I have three things. It's basically just planning, communication, and then the execution is when, since or and I went through probably 3 different helpers, just communicating in a way that your helper can really get it, and walking through everything for the execution part, and then the planning before you get there, going through your photos, make sure you know what you have for the job, know what you need, and then actually executing everything is very, very key. And the helper I have now has been awesome. He's been doing it for a couple of years, but like today, we had a big wrench thrown in our plan for a mini split. We ended up doing 2 heads, starting at 12, got done at 5, and then me and him, we just work off of each other, and we're able to see what we're not doing and what we are doing, and then we can work off of each other, and it's been amazing. So just being able to communicate and then see what you're doing as far as working with other people is very, very key.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's all part of like effective leadership communication. And one thing that you find as you are training people and as you are developing people is that a lot of times you blame if you're a leader, you blame the people you're working for. Like, what's wrong with this guy? He can never understand anything. You can never learn anything. He's so difficult. But then you find that as you grow as a leader, as you grow as a communicator, a lot of those problems get solved, and you realize that it was always you. It was you all along. You were the weak link in the chain that was causing that was causing the problem. So yeah, you're exactly right. Those steps are really key parts of leadership and communication. All right, so we're going to start going through some of my list here, and each one of these, I want to talk about how to deal with it in communication. So if you're being subjected to it, how you deal with it, and then also, sorry, my mom's texting me a lot. You can't ignore your mother when she's texting you. How you deal with it, and then also how not to be that person, or how to identify it in yourself. So we're going to kind of go both directions here. All right, so let's start with anger issues. Anger issues are kind of on the extreme side, but in our trade, it's a very common problem. And historically, especially, the old timers who would throw the wrench at the apprentice, that kind of thing. But it's, people who slam their tools, people who swear, even if they're not swearing at someone, they're just in general showing anger or extreme frustration about things that are going on in their day. On the first side of it, how you deal with it, the first thing is, and this is true of like every different type of relationship, trying to address it when somebody is being inappropriately angry. So we're not talking about a little bit of, stewing. We're talking about somebody who is being demonstratively angry. They're definitely mad. That is not the time to have in-depth communications with that person, because they're not going to be prepared to communicate productively. So a lot of people, and this is something that I just wish everyone in the trades would learn, because there's this, and there's even been a few comments to this extent where it's like, I'm not going to let somebody disrespect me, which is I'm all for that. I'm all for standing up for yourself, but recognizing that the time to do that, if you want things to go well for you in your life and career, is not when things are already escalated. In fact, most cases, the best thing to do when things get very escalated is just to try to walk away, just to try to find a different space, find something else to do, get out of their space as much as possible if you're dealing with somebody who's very angry. If it's a situation where it's continuous, like, for example, it's a boss and they are being angry to the extent that it's starting to become abusive. Now, again, society's drifted to where, like, sometimes even if people are just like having a hard time because they're in a bad mood or they're having stuff going on in their life, that people are like, I can't deal with this negative vibe. Like, I'm not talking about vibes here. I'm talking about like people who are being actually angry continuously or consistently. I shouldn't say continuously, but consistently. That's when it's time, when they're not angry, to address it with them, to bring it up and to say some version of, it's not healthy for us for there to be so much anger. And in order for this work relationship to work well, we're going to have to get past this. And those are the types of language that I would suggest using in general when you have to address something with somebody, is don't personally attack people. You almost, obviously there comes a time when, fists probably do have to fly if somebody throws the first punch at you or something, but generally speaking, you want to de-escalate everything. And one of the best ways to do that is not to personally attack someone. And that's the idea of getting on the same side of the desk with them. And that's why you say, like, we've got to deal with this anger issue. So we got to get beyond this. We got to get past this. Not, you're a really angry person and I can't, you're a jerk and I can't stand working for you. Especially when you're dealing with somebody who's in leadership, just recognize that, and this is true of everybody, but just recognize there are pressures, stresses, all kinds of things going on that you probably don't have any context for. And in most cases, when people are angry, they're not angry at you, even if they're telling you they are. They're just angry and you showed up. So they have stuff going on. They don't know how to appropriately deal with it. They don't have the tools probably to appropriately deal with it. Or they're just, they're just a bad person. They've just got issues, right? But they're not angry with you. They're just angry and you showed up. And so recognizing that, giving them space. And then if it's consistent enough, just saying, like, this isn't working for me, some version of that. Without personally attacking that person. And again, that's going to apply to a lot of these. On the other side of it, if you are the angry person, if you are the person who's, throwing tools, screaming and yelling, pitching a fit, the more extreme side of complaining, then you do need to deal with that. Now, somebody in the comments here just said, if I don't get the anger out, it'll become worse. There's several schools of thought on this. I don't actually believe in that school of thought. The way that's a fight fire with fire type of mentality. the way that you overcome anger is to address the root issue, the root cause of the anger, not to get it out. Obviously, there is a time at which, doing a primal scream or something like that makes you feel better. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not directed at anybody. Anger that is directed at somebody, that's not something you need to get out, because you're creating destruction when you do that. And destruction is not working for you, and it's not going to be working for anybody else. So dealing with the root cause of your anger, and a lot of anger actually comes from a feeling of impotence, a feeling of helplessness, a feeling of being stuck. A lot of it is just because you feel stuck in a situation that you can't control, or you feel out of control in some way. And so communicating the root emotion, and a lot of times it has to do with just things with your employment that are not working for you, or it could just be a particular circumstance that's just very difficult. In our trade, we run into a lot of those kind of particular circumstances. Learning to become more mature it's imperative. An imperative step in learning to be more mature is to learn how to deal with anger and to prevent it from getting to that point. That's a huge part, and putting structures in place so that way, if it is starting to escalate, that maybe you go outside and drink a bottle of water. Maybe you go, if you're a smoker, that's the time you go out and smoke a cigarette, I guess. But you got to de-escalate that. You can't let it get to that point. That's the best way. The next one that I have is careless people. And this is especially true with coworkers. This is where you find this a lot. So it could be the helper, it could be the other person on the project. If you're a projects worker, you've certainly seen this a lot. People who their excuse for things a lot is some version of, hey man, we all make mistakes. It's like, man, you expect me to be perfect, that kind of thing. And so for the more experienced tradesperson, that sort of attitude is super frustrating. Because it feels like they don't care. Or it feels like they're not paying attention. I think the solution for that one, especially if the person that you're interacting with is newer or younger, is just remember what you were like when you were newer or younger. It's really helpful when I start to get negative about, newer employees, apprentices, my teenage kids, whatever. Just remembering some of the things that I had at that stage. And it's not going to be the same. Like, you're not going to have all the same problems somebody else has, but you will have things that are in the same bucket. And a lot of times it's just a matter of seeing yourself rightly. And once you see yourself rightly, once you see your own sets of vices rightly, especially in the past, then it's a lot easier to give other people that space, because that's what you're doing. And part of developing people is giving them the space to grow, giving them enough rope that they can actually do something with it, whether it's make something out of it or hang themselves. You got to do that. And so for those of us who are a little bit more perfectionists or whatever, that can be a really big frustration. But then also, again, and that goes both ways. There is a point at which people are unsafe. There's a point at which people are very harmful, consistently harmful to projects. They make things go poorly because of their carelessness. And that's how you address it. You say, that careless act put this person at risk. Like, you are putting people's safety at risk because of your carelessness. A lot of times modern carelessness goes along with distraction. And a lot of times that distraction goes along with devices, goes along with being on their phone. Talking to someone while they're supposed to be working, at the same time, or looking down at the phone, or, looking at Facebook, or whatever the case may be. Just like I was doing when my mom was texting me. You get distracted, and then you make these sorts of mistakes. So those are, I think, and that's a very specific thing that you can address. You can point to the mission. The mission is to get the job done. And if people are allowing devices and distractions to get in the way, then you address that specific thing. It doesn't need to be a personal attack at the person. And again, this is a big part of this. All of this is that personal attacks are never appropriate. And the line is different for different people, especially when we get into some of these. Some people are going to feel personally attacked by things that you would never feel that way. And it's not because they're weak. It's not because there's anything wrong with them. It's because we have different experiences, and we all have different things that trigger us. We all have different things that get us worked up. And you want to be the kind of person that is not easily worked up by others. You don't give them that free rent in your head, like Eric Vincent said. And also, you don't want to be the type of person that triggers others because you think that they should be able to just get over it. Because in the workplace, it's about the mission. It's not about you being how you want to be and other people having to get over it, right? It's about teamwork, and part of teamwork is meeting other people where they are so that way they can do their work appropriately. One question somebody just asked on YouTube, so I want to address it quickly. He says, how much of a service manager's time is spent dealing with employee conflict? Is it common for your shop? No, I mean, no, it's not. It's not a huge percentage of the time. It's actually pretty small. It actually happens more with project workers. So people who are working closely together on teams, especially because we're a multidisciplinary shop. So we do electrical, we do refrigeration, we do construction all in-house. And so multiple trades in one company, they can start to have conflict. And then that falls under the same category. So there's not a whole lot of it. Service techs generally, especially if they're not head cases. I mean, we've had a couple lunatics over the years, and they're just the sort of people who look for negativity everywhere. And there was a lot of conflict there. But in those cases, the right answer, the only real answer, is just to move on from those people, not have them in your organization anymore. But in service shops, especially, it doesn't, or in ours, it's not a huge problem. But it can be with leadership for sure. And I remember even with myself having these sort of negative emotions with leadership and thinking that I knew so much better than them and just saying things, whining, complaining, whatever, in prior jobs, only then to realize once I got into that same position, I had the exact same challenges, because leading is a tough thing. Justin has something to add. Go ahead, Justin.
Hi. So at one point before I was a web developer, I went ahead and worked with a guy on like subflooring and everything. And at one point, we had all of our equipment laid out, and then it just started to rain, right? Just out of nowhere, no clouds in the sky, just started to downpour. And he was so mad about it. He started throwing tools everywhere. And I found one of the things that really went ahead and helped the situation was just me just backing away. I was the newbie on the project, and it wasn't my fault. He just went ahead and did his thing, started throwing everything, and I was like, it's fine, he'll go ahead and he'll be fine and all that. And eventually I got out of that workplace because it was a recurring thing. But if you just back away, a lot of the times I feel like that definitely kind of helps out rather than going ahead and confronting them in the moment, like you were saying.
Yeah. And it does happen. It happens a lot. And it is common to the trades because there is a lot of, it's a toxic combination of a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenge, and a heck of a lot of testosterone. I mean, you got a trade full of cavemen who, we're good at what we do because we have a little bit of that. We're not afraid to get dirty. We're not afraid to bust our knuckles. It's not a bad thing, but learning to manage that is huge. And like you said, especially if you're coming into it and you're dealing with angry people, when they're angry, the only real good thing to do is just give them space, just back away. That's not weak in a workplace context. There's nothing wrong with that. If people are being abusive in some way, then the time to deal with that is once they calm down, and it's much more impactful. I mean, what's the saying? Revenge is best served cold. We're not talking about revenge here, but we're talking about putting people in their place. Standing up for yourself, all those things are best served cold when the emotions are died down, and maybe even that person thought you didn't see, or maybe they thought you let it go. That's when you lay down the hammer and say, look, that's not working for me. It's not a healthy way to act in the workplace, and I'm not going to keep putting up with it. It's got to change. And that's exactly the way to say it. And you will be surprised how many people will respect you for that, much more than if you rise to the emotional occasion. Because when you do that, often then you will make a mistake. And then it gives you something that now you have to apologize for. Maybe somebody else sees you, or heaven forbid, a kid hears you, or something happens, and now you've made a fool of yourself. Now you have something that you've got to apologize for on top of it when you weren't even the one who started it. I've seen that happen so many times with perfectly well-meaning adults. You get caught up in the moment, and then you think you're being whatever you want to call it. You think you're being manly, you think you're being tough, you think you're standing up for yourself, you think you're standing up for somebody else, whatever, but really you're just emotionally escalating. You see a fire, and this is I forget who said this the first time, but it really is an apt metaphor. It's like you see a fire. Some people grab a can of gasoline and run towards the fire. They want to throw the next punch. It's like the bar fight mentality. It's like, hey, there's a fight over there. Let's go in and just start throwing punches, versus the person who sees a fire in the distance and they grab the fire extinguisher. And that means let's de-escalate emotions so that we can address the root problem, because the emotions aren't the root problem. They're just a result of the problem. Another one, unrealistic expectations. This kind of comes down to what Chad was saying. You know, you have the boss who comes in and starts like, hey, you done this yet? Have you done that yet? Why isn't this done yet? It's super annoying. And it comes a lot from unrealistic expectations or being a micromanager. So we'll lump that one in there with it. Micromanaging, being unrealistic. As the person who's doing that, the thing, you know, if you're prone to being a micromanager, having unrealistic expectations, a lot of times that comes from the fact that you're really good at your job yourself. And so if you are really good at your job yourself, you expect other people to do things in the way and with the speed that you do them. And that's not bad if it is a standard. So there's a difference between being somebody who sets a standard, meaning this is the goal that we're going to accomplish. This is what the work has to look like when it's done, versus somebody who says it has to be my way. And not only does it have to be my way, but I have to be involved every step of the way. That's not how you develop people, because that's not how you were developed, right? You weren't developed by somebody like that. You were developed because you were allowed to learn and grow and make mistakes and that sort of thing. So don't be that person. Set really clear objectives, and you can even put, you know, time steps into those objectives. It's much better for somebody to have something that might be on the unrealistic goal side on the forefront, so at least they know where they stand, than having somebody come in and interrupt them all the time when they're trying to complete something. And then on the other side of it, if somebody doesn't complete something in a timely fashion or it isn't up to standard, you always have to sandwich that with a lot of grace and kindness. So if you're going to address with somebody something that they didn't do right, I remember I was doing a change out, and it wasn't a change out. It was a trim. And this was right before my first son was born. So I was very young. I was 19 years old. And my supervisor rolled up on the job. His name is Kelly Klotz. Rolled up on the job, and he saw the work I was doing. And what I had done was I had taken the suction line. It was an 1 1/8 inch suction line. And, you know, we didn't have benders back then. And, you know, I don't have the strongest hands in the world. So I just took the natural bend that came from the roll copper, and I just kind of worked with that. You know, I just kind of took it and just kind of worked it. So it had this big swooping bend into the case coil. It was a gas furnace. And he came out and almost kind of like, it wasn't even square. It kind of like swooped out and then around, you know, as it went in. And he showed up and he kind of looked around a little bit. He was real quiet and he said, oh, okay, yeah, your grill works good and everything's lovely. He's like, that copper, nope, that's not going to work. And I'm like, come on, it's fine. He's like, redo it. And that's all he said. He just said, redo it. He didn't say, do it this way, do it that way. You're such a failure. You suck. Why don't you ever listen to me? He just said, redo it. I'm like, no, I mean, I don't have time to do it. He's like, you need to redo it. And he got in his van and he left. And that was really good for me. That was actually good management. I don't know that would work for everybody, but for me, it was to the point. He wasn't derogatory. He was just clear about the standard. That's not good enough. Now, maybe he could have been a little more specific about what it needed to look like, but he wasn't, he didn't deride my intentions. He didn't say, oh, you're a sloppy worker. You're a lazy worker. You're, you know, whatever. He just said that work isn't to the standard. It needs to be redone. And that's a good way. That's a good way to communicate. Somebody said throwing a tantrum is not masculinity. And that is absolutely true. My wife, there's been a few times, you know, because I have that in me. I have a bad natural temper. I've worked to control it over the years, but I've punched some holes in drywall, even recently. And she always does some version of like, are you done? Like, you know, are you done being a child? Because it isn't, like you said, it isn't masculinity. It isn't any sort of behavior that we want to model. What we want to get to the place of is being able to control it before we get to that place and being able to productively communicate. And a lot of times it just means if you're super emotional, just give yourself some time. You know, it may take a little bit. Just go do something else where you're not near people until you can get your senses back. All right, next one is sarcasm and rudeness. Now this is, I would let's lump condescension in here because that's on the list, but it's further down. We might not get to it. So sarcasm, rudeness, and condescension. I don't know about you. I am a naturally sarcastic person. It's the way that I like to communicate, and I like sarcastic people, meaning I like people who are sarcastic with me. It's just So it's one of the ways that we dealt with problems and conflict in my family growing up. I worked with my uncle as a teenager, and that's just how we communicated. And he's very conflict averse. So he would just kind of make a little bit sideways jokes about stuff, and he expected you to get the message, right? And I don't mind that. I don't mind working that way, but it's because I'm genetically wired that way. So I can't expect other people to feel the same way. And in fact, I just screwed up with this last night. I'm gonna out myself here, but my wife and I are taking dance lessons. Okay, so I thought it'd be fun to learn some dance steps with my wife. And the girl who's teaching us, she's very bubbly, enthusiastic, whatever. And I made fun of something. She kept saying the same word over and over again. And so I was like, "Oh, you're going to say that again? Like, how many times can you say the same thing?" It was just a verbal tick. But after I said it, and I even forget the joke I made, but it was a sarcastic comment, a sarcastic joke. After I said it, I saw that like she did not receive it well at all. Like she saw it as a personal criticism, and I felt terrible. And so the first step is to, with sarcasm especially, is to realize, like, if you're working closely with somebody and you know that it's just part of your banter, part of your way, I think it's okay. Maybe I'm only giving space for it because it's a trait of mine. I don't know, but I think it's okay. And I think that also goes with certain types of joking around. I mean, there's lines that have to be drawn, especially, racism, sexism, those sorts of things. Just don't do it in the workplace. Just don't. Those aren't funny jokes to do in the workplace. It'll get you in trouble if you do it enough, even if it's completely, you're not intending anything by it. But there's other categories of just joking around that are kind of light criticism that are jokes. But just be really careful with that. Is you don't want to sacrifice your work relationship. You don't want to sacrifice the goal, the mission that you're working towards, because you can't help yourself making a joke or being sarcastic or whatever. Now, rudeness on the other side is different. It's just you being you and expecting everybody else to adapt to you. That's how rude people behave. And that's also, even passive aggressive people do that sort of thing as well. And one way that my business coach used to say it was, you have to be willing to speak to people with the words that they need to hear, not the words that you want to say. So there may be a way of communicating that you like other people to communicate to you, and words you like to communicate with, ways you like to communicate. But if the goal is the mission, then don't communicate the way you want to, communicate the way the other person needs you to. Now, a lot of people will say something like, well, that's inauthentic. You're being fake if you do that. You're not being, I'm just being real. I'm just being honest. I'm just being truthful. Some people, if people don't like it, they can get over it. Well, that is certainly one way of looking at it. And if you have a long-term relationship with somebody, like in a marriage or whatever, like, you don't want to completely change who you are for another person that you're going to spend a lot of time with. But in a work context, if the way you're behaving or if the way you're speaking is going to get in the way of the work, it's going to get in the way of your career missions, then just don't do it. And it falls into the, it doesn't make you money category. So there may be something that you think other people should get over, like, well, they should just get over it. It's their problem. Well, okay, that's true. But is the way that you're acting making you money? And generally speaking, sarcasm, rudeness, passive aggression, those sorts of things they don't make you money. They create enemies in the workplace rather than allies. And a really big part of career success is having a lot of allies within your organization, outside your organization, with different manufacturers, everybody you interact with. Having allies is a good thing. And a lot of people will call that butt kissing. There's a difference between butt kissing, which is being overly enthusiastic about things inauthentically, or overly complimentary or flattering or whatever, versus just being a generally nice person. Some of the nicest people that I know, Keith Ledford with Carrier for a long time. Some of you might know Keith, and Don Gillis, both just super kind people. Still men's men, still, they can hang in the field. They know what they're doing, but they always are fundamentally kind. And that means that they don't always say things that they're probably thinking, because they're considering another person. So actually, there were some comments. let's see here. What was the one that I wanted to read? Most men aren't taught what masculinity is. A man doesn't think he knows before he speaks. At least that's how it should be. Yeah, I mean, a big part is just kind of summarize, just distill that down. Think before you speak. That's a fundamentally good thing and a fundamentally important part of communication. Oh, I know what I wanted. So I wanted to jump into the how do you deal with somebody who's sarcastic or rude in a way that isn't working for you. And I think a really nice, it's not nice, a really good phrase to use is just either, I don't appreciate that. And then just leaving the space, or yeah, that's not working for me. That way of communicating isn't working for me. Sarcasm doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me. So we need to work on this, the way that we're communicating, and replacing you with we is a good tool. It seems a little fake. It seems like it's going to be unnatural, but it actually isn't. So somebody says to you like, hey man, you need to get your butt out of my way, some whatever. Be like, no, that's not how we're going to do this. That's not how we're going to communicate on this. We're going to communicate in a way where we're working together, we're getting this job done, and we're treating each other with respect. Does that work for you? When you have people who are very difficult to work with, and especially when it's a peer relationship, some version of agreement seeking is a way to escalate without escalating. It's a way that adults escalate. So you say so an example would be like, somebody says something, let's just say a version is somebody makes a joke, they make a joke about your mom or about your wife or about your girlfriend that you don't appreciate, something like that. Okay. We'll just use that as an example because it comes up sometimes. And you just say, okay, so I just want to be clear with you. I don't appreciate that. And I don't want us to communicate in that way. I'm going to respect you and I want you to respect me. Does that work for you? And when you say, does that work for you? You're expecting a response from them. You're not just talking at them, you're talking with them. And you're looking for an agreement. Say something like, oh man, whatever, man, I was just joking. That's okay. But I want to hear from you. Are you clear that that's not going to work for me? Are we clear on this? I'm happy to work with you. We're going to get this job done, but that's not going to work for me. That's not going to fit. Does that make sense? You with me? Get confirmation from them, because until somebody else verbally confirms with you that they are on board with what you're saying, or at least agree to the terms of the relationship, which is that don't do that anymore. Otherwise it's not going to work with us. It really anchors. And a lot of people will get kind of like worked up about it, a little bit emotional about it, but that's okay. You just let them do them. Don't try to address it. Don't try to like make a big deal about it. Some people start running their mouth, and that's when you can be like, no. This isn't the time for this. I just want to make sure that you understand what I'm saying here, that's not that joke that you made, that comment, that way, that anger, that sarcasm, that whatever. That's not how I want to communicate. And it would be better if we don't talk than if that's how we're going to talk. Do you understand me? And that is a very, powerful way of communicating, regardless of your position. And if somebody talked to me that way, it wouldn't matter if they were working in the warehouse. It wouldn't matter if they were on a job site. If somebody spoke to me that way, I would respect that. And I think most people do. The people who don't respect it aren't the type of people you want to work with. Good people respect clear communication. They respect straight shooters. And being a straight shooter doesn't mean you're escalating, doesn't mean you're being a crybaby, doesn't mean you're throwing stuff, doesn't mean you're yelling, screaming, cussing, doesn't mean you're calling them names back, doesn't mean you're bringing their junk into it or your junk into it or anything. It's just you're clear, crystal clear about what you are saying without personally attacking that other person. Justin said, sarcasm all over text is also hit or miss. And that's really true, actually. So, using text as a method for, any sort of disciplinary conversation or intense conversation or sarcasm or anything, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Unless you are really close to that person and you already have like a really good drumbeat of your senses of humor and you're literally just doing that. But that takes a long time to build. That's not something you're going to do right away. Don't make the mistake of sending that text that gets misunderstood, because it can really go sideways quick. I mean, I've done that a lot. And also don't get in flame wars over text or social media. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. I still do it sometimes. when somebody says something on YouTube or whatever that's completely off base, but I shouldn't. It's not helpful. Doesn't help anything. So don't do that over text. It's not working. Next one is cliques within the workplace. Cliques within the workplace are people create these little tribes. This is very common in office environments, but it can also happen, especially in crews. It can happen when people start to they'll have their dispatcher. When I worked at a big shop, and there were multiple dispatchers, and so you'd have a group. Each group would have their own dispatcher who they would know that they could get away with things, or they can make special requests and all that sort of thing. And that sort of tribalism within an organization is really bad, and it doesn't work for you, because the idea that you have your people, that's nice. I mean, it's nice to have people who got your back and all that kind of thing, but you don't want to be that person who you're pitting your group against another group, where you're talking bad about them, you're throwing them under the bus, that kind of thing, because now you're creating just as many enemies as you have friends. And in order to advance your career, in order to be a person who's you're really growing in your career, you want to have as many allies as you can have and as few enemies as you can have. Now, when I say enemies, I want to distinguish. There are people who aren't going to like you just because you are successful. There are people who are haters in the world. I see them on my YouTube channel sometimes, but it's very tempting to confuse people with haters who actually don't like you for a reason. And a lot of people don't like me because I've actually mistreated them in some way. And I may not even know what it is, right? But you better believe that there are a lot of people who I would tag as haters, where in some way I've hurt their feelings. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I didn't respond to their email, whatever, who knows? And so they have some reason in their head for why they're doing that. And if I could have been a little better, I might have prevented that reason from occurring within them. And I'm not saying that's something to get worked up about or lose sleep at night, but recognizing that being the type of person who is kind, who is generous, who goes out of your way to help people, and you are that person consistently, you're going to develop a lot more allies, and you're going to have a lot fewer enemies. And that's how you move up in the world. I mean, that is how you make progress. And people will say well, what about, some evil dictator or whatever? What about them? They had a lot of enemies. Yeah, but just recognize that even those sorts of people within their cultural context, within the place they were, they made a lot of allies. And so they still generated, a lot of, I'm going to do air quotes, good, in order to then have the power to do a lot of evil. And so my point just being that if you want to grow in your career, if you want to get someplace, behaving in that way is how you're going to do that, which is just not creating enemies, if you can help it. Scripture says, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. So that means that sometimes you can't live at peace with all men, but as much as it depends on you, live at peace with everybody. Don't create unnecessary quarrels. So yeah, back to cliques. If you find that cliques are occurring, the only way to deal with cliques is just not to participate in them. That doesn't mean that you don't have your people who you trust and who you communicate with. It just means that you don't exclude, attack, gang up on other people, because you can't do anything if other people are creating a clique against you. It just becomes mean girl politics, silly stuff. The next one is nepotism. You see that a lot in our trade, especially with family businesses, where, the son who doesn't really, carry his weight gets a special, gets something special out of it. And you're kind of wondering, what's going on here. On that front, I think if you are working in an organization where it feels like there is nepotism, first off, be very careful, because that can get really ugly. And you don't want to work in an organization like that. But let's say even at Kalos, because people could feel that way. People could feel like, I have two sons who work in the business. I'm a son of my dad. My brother works in the business, brother-in-laws, all that stuff. People can start to feel like, well, they got that opportunity because of the connection to family or whatever. And if you feel that way, if you feel nepotism is in play, then you should talk to the leaders about it and be very, just be very clear about it, very clear about where you stand, that you want to work in an organization that is merit-based. And trust me, you do want to work at it. If you're a high performer, if you're somebody who wants to grow in your career, you want to work for a merit-based organization. You want to work for an organization where people are promoted based on their merit, what they bring to the table, not based on who they know. So address it if you do see it, but also for anybody who is tempted to take family loyalty into account in making business decisions, that is a horrible slippery slope. Now the challenge is it's a fine tightrope to walk. I tend to be actually a little harder on family members in a lot of ways, maybe even, a little more rude, a little more sarcastic, that sort of thing towards family members. And that's not a good trait either. But you want to definitely make sure that if you're leading an organization with family members in it, that you do not allow nepotism to slip in, because it will destroy an organization and it will prevent it from growing, because people will eventually catch on to the fact that it's not about performance. It's not about merit. It's about who you know or who you're related to. Anybody who's if any of you are in Zoom and you want to pipe up, either raise your hand in Zoom or you can comment and say that you got something to add, and I'm happy to bring it on. Let's see what else. Not investing or believing in training or other sorts of investment in employees and staff. That's something that's strictly a leadership thing. But that leadership could be as simple as the guy you're riding with who doesn't take the time to teach, doesn't take the time to go over the whys of things. And this is one that a good communication, I think, can help with a lot. And it helps to know what you need in order to learn and communicating that. And there's no weakness in that. So if somebody comes to me or any good leader of an organization and says, I'm struggling with XYZ, and I think I need this or that in order to help master it. Is there any way you can help me with that? It would be a very foolish businessman or leader to ignore that request. And so if you're in a position where you don't feel like you're being given what you need, or like, hey, I wish that I could have taken this class, or I wish I could have learned more about this or that, or worked with that technician, or been on that project so I could have learned, or whatever. Just communicating about that along with what you know about yourself and how you learn is very helpful. And as leaders, especially, you recognize really quickly that that a lot of people pay lip service to the ideas of training, and really it's not necessarily that they want to learn, it's that they want to be seen learning because they see it as some sort of like magical path to advancement, when really it's the learning leads to the skill, which leads to the mastery, which leads to advancement. That's how it works. So you actually have to be good at something. It's not you don't get a patch that you put on your shirt that all of a sudden says, I am good at this. And then regardless of whether you are good at it or not, you make more money. You actually have to be good at it. And so I think a lot of leaders have become gun shy of training and a lot of other things. But when you show the self-awareness to be able to communicate how you learn or what you need, then that helps me think, okay, well, this person has clearly actually got some understanding here about themselves and what it's going to take for them to get there. Let's push into that. Now, obviously, it would be better if all trainers, owners, leaders of businesses, just had these really good structures in place for every single thing. That's just not the reality of our trade. I mean, there's very few companies, mine included, where you have everything all worked out. You don't. We're busy. Every person's different. So there's a lot of things that get in the way of really good training, but having some self-awareness and some clear communication can really help with that. Taking credit for others' work. I mean, holy smoke, that is a tough one, because when you work with somebody who takes credit for things that you've done, first of all, it's totally demoralizing. But what are you going to do? Are you going to be like, this goes back to what Chad was saying, like, you don't like conflict. You don't want to be the person who's like, in everybody's face trying to tell them how great you are all the time. But then you work with this ego monster who, everything is their idea. Everything is they're the one who pulled it off, that sort of thing. And that's actually really helpful when you run into people like that, if you can talk to them with a couple people. Because with these sorts of perspectives, a lot of times when people are that way, they don't perceive that they are. Like egotistical people, by their very nature, don't usually perceive that they're egotistical. They just think they're awesome, So bringing a couple people to them and being like, hey, we talked about, we didn't appreciate how you said that, like, this was you, and it was a team thing. So I think we need to operate as a team if this is going to work. That sort of thing is helpful. Now, sometimes it's a boss or a leader who takes credit for everything that the team is doing, i.e. me, because I did it all myself, obviously. I mean, as you can see with my nice van here in the background and all these condensers that I clearly did myself recently with my very nice van. So if you have a leader who takes credit for things, that can be challenging, and you're probably not going to do much to reform a super egotistical leader. And this is where you just have to decide whether you're willing to deal with it or not. You're not going to, you as you working for an organization, you're not going to reform somebody who has a giant ego. The downside is that a lot of business leaders do have big egos because it's what drove them to become business leaders. It's sort of like politicians. It's like saying, I want to vote for a politician who has no ego. It's like, well, good luck. So a lot of times it's sort of between, you're choosing between evils. There's a lot of egotistical business owners out there, and a lot of the actual successful ones tend to be kind of egotistical too, because it is about building this big, kingdom for themselves, and it makes it kind of sucky to work for. And so in that, you just have to kind of decide, is it worth it or isn't it? But again, if you are in a place where you have a voice, I think being able to talk about it clearly and just saying, hey, we're not getting the team feel. I think it's more healthy if the team gets credit for things rather than just the leader. So just something to think about. I think good people will be willing to communicate in that way. Go ahead, Jessica.
So it's not something that I've had to deal with personally, but I know that there are a lot of women in the trade that struggle with those high testosterone fueled men having women in the trades.
So are you saying like a solution to it is to have more women, or are you just like addressing the way that women are mistreated?
Well, I think more women do need to be in the trade. Acceptance would be a lot easier at that point, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But just, putting it out there that, I went to a house today where they said they had 3 or 4 other people that wouldn't even take the job because they don't get dirty. I crawled under the trailer. I mean, right. I can get dirty too. Women work hard, just as hard as men. And we need to work on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a lot of it has to do with, it's both sides of that coin. I think there are a lot of women who don't see themselves in the trade because they don't see themselves in the trade, right? It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And if we think that we're not susceptible to it, then we're just fooling ourselves. We all are attracted to careers that we have some reference for. The reason why I went into the trades is because my dad was in the trades and he encouraged me to go into the trades. If it wasn't for that, if my dad had been a doctor and my mom was a lawyer and I never knew anything about the trades, I probably wouldn't be a tradesperson, right? And so the same thing is true in the trades with women or minorities or whatever. If people don't see themselves in it, they can't visualize it, they don't have any experience or reference for it, then they're not attracted to it. But there'd be a lot of women who would be excellent at the trades, and specifically HVAC for a lot of reasons, but they're not. And that does create an imbalance. It does create, the reason why it seems so weird to have a woman AC technician is because there are so few women AC technicians. Decades ago, it used to seem weird for women to be a doctor, and now it doesn't seem weird at all. It's completely normal. It wouldn't be strange at all to have a woman doctor. So it's all just about getting used to it. And that is a big part for the trade. And but it is also still challenging because it's just hard to convince a lot of women that the trades would be good, which is why I like to start younger. I like to start when kids are in middle school and high school and just start to talk to them about it. Like, hey, have you considered it? Because a lot of them haven't. And if you can plant those seeds, then that does make a big difference. And it can balance out some of that. I mean, frankly, some of that. We have this guy, AD, who's just saying all kinds of horrible things. So let's go ahead and get him out of the channel. It's so funny. Like it's like you always get one person who's just like taking exactly what you're saying as far as like making the trade better, and they're like saying the exact opposite, just with all kinds of language and stuff. It's like, seriously, really? It's funny. Anyway, let's see here. What's next on my list? So taking credit for others' work, that was a big one. Exaggeration. Oh man, exaggerate. I'll put exaggeration and lying into the same category. We all worked with, I mean, I don't know if you've all worked with this, but I had several guys, who used to tell these, and they were horrible stories, about there were all these like basically porno stories about these situations that they'd go into and all these things that would happen to them in the calls. And it's like, besides being completely inappropriate to say at work, they were also completely false. I mean, the guys who are saying this are like the ugliest dudes you've ever worked with, and they just make up all of these fantasies. And I mean, that's just one example of it, but just all this exaggeration in the trade, which leads to poor training. It leads to lots of misconceptions. And if you've worked with people like this who are always exaggerating everything, they've got some crazy story for everything. It just gets tiring after a while. Like at first, it's actually kind of funny when you first meet somebody like that or work with somebody like that. But after a while, it just gets really tiring. And so like I actually like to start questioning people's stories after a while. Like, come on, I don't think that really happened. And some people do the whole, they go, "You calling me a liar?" It's like, no, I'm just saying I don't think that really happened. That's all. I mean, those are my thoughts. My thoughts are, I don't think it really happened. And after a while, once people catch on that you don't like buy their stories, then often they'll quit. And you can do it completely. You don't have to be a jerk about it in the way that you call them out on their stories. But it does get like, if people think that you're a sucker for their stories, they will keep going with it sometimes. And then generally lying, it's a really bad habit that a lot of people have. And you'll know it because you'll meet the guy who lies about stuff that there's no reason to lie about it. Like they just lie about stuff that makes no difference. And so it's completely habitual. Obviously you have people who lie, like bosses who lie about things in order to get you to work for them, that sort of thing. That is much more dangerous. People who lie for their own advantage. But a lot of people are just habitual liars. And that's where I don't think calling that out to some degree in a way that's not attacking. You're not saying you're a liar, but you're just saying, no, that's not how that happened. That's not how that happened. That's not, or I don't think that's how that happened. I think that might be an exaggeration, that sort of thing. Can kind of train people how to communicate to you. And that's part of being somebody who sticks up for yourself, even in what you're willing to listen to. I think of a couple people who I've worked with that I've really respected, even with me, because I could actually be quite a talker sometimes in the van when I was young, and they would just be like, "All right, we're just gonna stop talking for a little while." It's like, that's good. It's healthy. It's healthy to be able to communicate that way, and it's something I would encourage in all of you. Dishonesty to customers. Okay, now this gets more serious. If you're working for an organization that is consistently dishonest to customers, so not a temporary moral failing, because we all have temporary failings in integrity. We all make mistakes. I think it's important for us to recognize that we all make mistakes. But if you're working for a company where that is a regular occurrence, where that's part of how they do things, with that, you pretty much just need to work somewhere else. I mean, you're not going to. People who have bad integrity, bad scruples, don't care about telling the truth or whatever. It's not going to work. But you will run into cases sometimes, and maybe you've even run into it with yourself, where you are dishonest, maybe not even to the customers, not even to hurt the customer, but just to get them to leave you alone. I find that when I have been dishonest to customers, and I have, it's usually just to get them to stop bothering me. It's not to try to screw them in any way or to try to take money from them, but it's just to get them to stop. And that is a bad habit. It's better to not speak than it is to say a dishonest word. And that is a discipline that you have to commit yourself to. On the other hand, if somebody else, like I said, if somebody else is being dishonest to customers, maybe it's a coworker, that sort of thing, then you should call them on it kindly. And this goes back to one of the things that my wife and I talk about all the time with raising kids is pointing people to a standard, pointing people to who they have already said they want to be. And most people want to be honest. Most people want to do a good job. They don't want to be hacks. They don't want to lie to customers. They don't want to be low integrity. And so saying something to them like, "Hey man, I don't think that's who you want to be. I don't think that's who you are. Like I heard you say that to the customer, And I think that was a mistake. So, I mean, can we handle that differently? It's a way that's being kind, but it's calling them out. And the type of language that I'm using, for those of you who know Neil Comparetto, this is exactly how he talks to people. It's how he's talked to me sometimes when he's seen me being a little egotistical. He's just like, no, that's not cool. Like, that's not how you want to be. That's not who you are. And being that to people really helps them. Like, if one of your goals in life, we talk about goal setting, who you want to be, is to help people, make people better around you. Being able to call people out in that way, that's not aggressive, it's not intense, but it just says, is that who you want to be? Are you sure? Can help people think, and can help them know that they're not really getting away with it. We don't got to cover that one too much, because obviously we all know that being dishonest to customers, lying, is wrong. Being condescending, that's a tough one. I am definitely condescending sometimes, especially when you feel like people are being really dumb. Like, when we say dumb, I don't mean like intellectually stupid. I mean thoughtless, careless, destructive, even, not RTFMing, not paying attention to detail. You can get condescending, and it's not a good trait. And if somebody is being condescending to you and you don't appreciate it, then I think that's exactly what you should say. I don't appreciate that tone. Like, that's not, if there's something I could do different, then tell me. But, we can respect each other. I respect you. So you can respect me, and we can talk to each other like adults. And I actually like that phrase a lot. We can communicate like adults here, just where we respect each other. And if there's something that I didn't do that I should have done, or a resource that I should have read that I didn't, then just tell me that. But don't be condescending. I would much rather, I think it's actually safer to be playfully sarcastic than it is to be snidely condescending. Nobody likes, as much as people don't like a whiner and complainer, people don't like condescending people. People who think they're better than you is just gross. Nobody likes it. Don't be that person. Actively work to not be that person. And when people do treat you that way, and you have built enough rapport with them, then communicate that to them, that no, that's not, mutual respect, treating each other like adults. That's how we want to communicate. And if it's extreme, that's when you push for that agreement from them. Can you agree that we can just communicate like adults? We don't need to be condescending. We don't need to talk to each other like we're better than each other or anything like that. We can just communicate respectfully like adults. Do you agree to that? And that's an uncomfortable moment. But if you really need somebody to change because it's about to make you freak out, then that's a way that you can communicate, and it is effective. Or it brings things to a head. And sometimes if it brings things to a head, when things come to a head and they get emotional and you are continuously being disrespected, it's kind of like, all right, I mean, we're done here then, right? I mean, you agree we're kind of done here. That's a great way to quit, by the way. Just saying, like, I think we both know this isn't working, right? Right? Okay. All right. So we're done. It's a good way to, I mean, they'll still probably dislike you, but who can disrespect that way of being? Unwillingness to learn. This is another one that if you're working with younger people, newer people, you can start to get really frustrated with with their unwillingness to learn things. But a lot of times we shouldn't confuse people's unwillingness to learn with their lack of practice with learning. There's a lot of people who are willing to learn, but they just don't quite know how to learn yet. And good organizations, good teachers don't just teach people the topic, they teach them how to learn. And most people who really struggle learning don't know how to translate the tactile things that they do to things that they understand. And then the reverse, things they understand to things they can do. In many cases, it's because they don't know how to build a mental model. They don't know how to make a cartoon in their head to help them remember. Good teachers don't just say, here's how it works, memorize it. They say, here's how you can remember this. And so using things like metaphor, that's why when we teach electricity, we're using all kinds of metaphors, about cars going over a bridge and, water and water pressure. And it's like this, it's like that. And we're using metaphor and simile in order to help people understand things better. Just to go back to, wait, did somebody unmute there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when it comes to, you got to figure out how that person, like, what will work best for them to understand, how to do something. Like, you got to try different training methods.
Yeah.
Instead of just telling them how it needs to be done.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Recognizing that not everybody learns the same way you learn. And also many of us have forgotten the way that we learned it in the first place. We remember how we learn things now once we already have all this context. Once you build up context, it's a completely unfair advantage. You know where to go, you know where to go to get the resources, you know how to find what you're looking for, you know how the tools of the trade, you know the terminology. We have so many different advantages that people who are newer don't have. Somebody made a good point. Easy Heat Cooling said some old salts don't want to learn also. And that's also true, right? It isn't just younger, newer people. I mean, I run into some of the most difficult people to teach are people who already think they know the answer. That's that old Mark Twain comment. And there's many like this, there's never somebody who knows less than the one who already thinks he knows it all. All of those sorts of things apply. And so the first step to really learning something is believing that there's something that you need to learn. That's the whole Dunning-Kruger effect. We did a whole podcast on this. If you're not familiar with the term Dunning-Kruger effect, look it up. It shows a curve of like people who really don't know anything about a topic are quite confident that they know a lot. And then, or if they think they don't know anything, but they get very little knowledge and they think they know all of it. Then once you actually gain more knowledge, you start to get less confident. And so then you get more confident again once you actually are a master of it. So it kind of goes like this. It's this curve and then there. So there's a lot of people who have never really gotten any mastery, but they feel like they're masters of the trade, but they've never pursued that additional education where you can take things that you've physically done, you've translated it to your head, and now you can translate it from head back to hands rather than just staying all in the tactile phase, all in the hands-on phase. So that does limit you. All right, next one. Oh, actually, Dwayne asked the question, is being condescending the same as sarcasm? It can be. So sarcasm kind of denotes a little bit of intended humor, or like you're saying something in a way that you don't mean. In many cases, condescending is just straight up acting like you're better than somebody else. Being condescending can be even in a tone like, oh, so you still don't know how to do that, do you? Like that's condescending, not sarcastic. You're just like, how many times do we have to go over this? That's condescending. Or even I sigh a lot. I have a very condescending sigh, I'm told, and I do hear it sometimes. And that's all condescension. It's all like, you're so dumb, I'm so smart, why can't you be like me? Those are all, and that can be ego, but it's not necessarily ego. It can be a version of ego, a version of disappointment. You don't want people to feel like you're disappointed in them. That's not helpful. You don't want to expose your ego to others. That's not helpful. If you stay away from both of those, then you're probably going to stay away from condescension. Laziness. Now that's a big one. Don't call people lazy. It doesn't help. And because people who are lazy don't know that they are, generally speaking, at least in a work context. And so a lot of times people who are lazy, they just don't really know what hard work is. Remember that a lot of us grew up in a generation. I'm kind of at the tail end of it, but we grew up in a generation that did a lot of hard work as kids. And that's when we really learn a lot of who we are. That's who we become who we are. And so when as a kid, you have to do a lot of chores and you're doing yard work. And for me, I'm working with my grandpa out at the aircraft hangar and working with my dad and uncle wiring stuff and doing projects and with my mom with animals and all that. You learn hard work as part of a way of being that if you didn't learn that as a kid, it's very hard to learn as an adult. And so a lot of people who are lazy, they are lazy, but you don't need to call them that. Instead, if you want to try to reform them, you do it not by calling them lazy, but by setting standards, by saying, this is how much work to get done in a day. And here, work with this person who's going to show you how that can be done. My solution to laziness is letting people work with, people like Eric Melly, who he's not rushing, but he's staying busy all day and he gets a lot done with very high quality because he thinks through everything he's doing and he just stays moving. He stays busy. And so a lot of people, some people equate laziness to not rushing around all the time, but none of us should be rushing around all the time, especially when it's as hot as it is right now. That doesn't help to be just rushing around all the time. It's just about optimizing your emotions, thinking about thinking about what you do. But again, calling somebody lazy, even if they are lazy, like by, because that's all a comparative, like what is lazy, what isn't lazy? Well, it's all subjective, compared to, me compared to my grandpa, I'm insanely lazy, right? To the way he's worked his entire life. Even compared to my mom, I'm lazy. But me compared to a lot of other people, not lazy. And so it's all comparative, right? It's not helpful to call people lazy or even to think of them as lazy. You can think about whether or not you can work with it, their level of work ethic, their relationship to work, whether they're a worker or not. But it's not helpful to call people names. And lazy is just one that we tend to think of sometimes. Another one is how we used to do it, or this is my way of doing it. And that goes back to that's another one Chad did. Somebody comes in and tries to change the way you're doing it. Josh talked about that as well. Now, this is a two-edged sword because a lot of times you feel like people are being that way and it's actually just you're resistant to change. So here's a quick career tip. In order to be good and grow in your career, do not get attached to your way of doing things. I'm going to say that again, because it's huge. We all do it, but in order to advance in your career, do not get attached to your way of doing things. The way you do it can always be improved, and it can always be improved by you, and it can always be improved by somebody else. So if you're not open to completely shaking up the way you do things, if it's a better way, then you're going to be held back in your career. And sometimes you're going to have to change how you do things because of things that are out of your control. Safety regulations, government regulations, union standards, local codes, your boss having a different standard or way of doing things. You're going to have to do that. So you have to be flexible to adjust and shift to changes. If you are an inflexible person, you're going to struggle. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are at your job. If you're inflexible, you're going to struggle. And I'm sorry, because sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes people are dumb and they impose things on you that are annoying and dumb. And I've been there on both sides. I've imposed dumb rules on people and ways of doing things. And I've had dumb stuff imposed on me. But getting worked up about that ain't going to help nobody, because anywhere you work, it's going to be that way unless you own your own company. And then if you own your own company, trust me, you're going to have a whole nother set of heartache that you're going to have to deal with that you cannot even imagine. So be flexible to that. But also, if somebody is the type of person who is trying to butt in with new ways of doing things, and for a fact that it's not going to be helpful right now, because you do know sometimes, saying some version of, that's great, can we talk about this on the next one? Because right now I'm really focused on getting this done efficiently. Not getting it done fast, not getting it done quick, not getting it done so you can get home and, watch Oprah. Chase your wife around the house or whatever, it's not that. It's so that way you can get it done efficiently. That's a really good word. Always use the word efficiently instead of fast, especially if you're talking to management and leadership. So if management or leadership are trying to impose some new process on you midway and it's going to create chaos, just say, okay, I actually want to hear what you have to say on this, but can we do that next time? Because I want to get this done efficiently, and this is going to lead to some inefficiency for me right now. You say that to me, huge sign of maturity to address it in that way, rather than just getting all worked up about it. Not letting things get in the way of your mission. All right. Next one is overreacting. Now, this is a huge one. I am a huge overreactor. So whatever's going on right now, I feel like is the biggest thing in the world. So if somebody makes a mistake, whatever it is, there's something going on, with one of the employees, there's something going on, there's a complaint, there's a situation, there's an insurance claim, somebody got in an accident, whatever it is, somebody did an install that had a callback, or there was some problem with the install or whatever. I feel like this one problem represents the entire organization and everything's going to pot, and I have to deal with it right now. Otherwise everything's going to be ruined, right? That's what overreacting is. Now, here's the thing. Overreacting is a natural trait of people who care. If you've ever had a mother or a spouse who overreacts, they do it because they care. They're not doing it just because they're, psychotic. I mean, maybe sometimes, but not generally. They're doing it because they care and they want things to go well. They don't like to see things that they care about going poorly, right? What's the solution to it, though? Well, if you are that person, the solution is to take a chill pill. You're going to feel those emotions about it. That's going to wash over you, but you got to give it a little bit of time before you start talking to people about it. For me, that means that if I have something that happens, I immediately want to start writing that email to the management team. Let's pump out that email, right? Give it a little bit. Think about it. Think about exactly what you want to say. And then in many cases, you only need to say it to one person. It's just a phone call. It's just a quick meeting with somebody. It's just meeting them on a job. It's not an email. It's not a text. It's not a group meeting. That's what overreaction does, is it makes you think that one little problem represents this gigantic institutional issue, right? It's not always leadership, though. It could be the guy you're working with. He just overreacts about everything. He makes such a big deal about everything. And that's, it's kind of being a drama queen, right? I mean, we all have a little bit of that in us, I guess. Some people don't, but a lot of us do. So backing off, giving time, that sort of thing. Dwayne asked the question, in your opinion, is a quick reaction often an overreaction? Can be. And it depends on what it is, right? I mean, sometimes a quick reaction is absolutely necessary. And that's what I'm saying. The service tech in me is a quick reactor, right? That's how you solve problems. And if you're working in the grocery store space and you've got a rack that goes down, you need to react quick. That's not an overreaction. That's an appropriate reaction, right? That's what the customer requires. So it isn't always true that a quick reaction is an overreaction, but especially when what you're going to do is going to affect a lot of people. Think about how many people what you're going to do is going to affect, and then think about whether or not you're actually communicating in the best possible way. Or are you knee-jerking in a way that's going to punish people or distract people who don't need to be punished or distracted? So that's something to think about as a leader. Now, if you are working with overreactors, you're working with people who tend to overreact. What do overreactors want to see from you? This is a good question. My dad's an overreactor. He knows he is. He's a good guy. Love my dad, but he's an overreactor. But I learned after, because we had some real deals early in the business, where we were both overreacting back and forth at each other, right? Super unproductive. But I realized pretty quick, what does an overreactor want to see from the person that they're talking to? I want you to think about it for a second. What?
A reaction.
They want to see a reaction. Often they do. Yeah. Often they do want to see a reaction. And if you have parents who are that way, you know that, right? You know that what they want to see is a reaction. But in a business context, what can you do in lieu of a reaction? What can you do that isn't an emotional reaction, but gives them the same feedback that they want? Any thoughts on that from the Zoom crew?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So if you are interacting with somebody who's an overreactor, okay, they're an employer, they're a leader in some way, and they're an overreactor, and they're overreacting at you or in your space, what can you do that gives them what they need in order to get them to stop overreacting, at least in your presence, in lieu of some sort of big emotional reaction?
I think it's going to depend on the type of personality that you're talking to usually. Saying stop overreacting is usually not a good
nope,
thing to
yeah,
say.
that's not a good one. It's like telling your wife, would you just calm down? That always works. Telling people how to be always works. That was sarcasm. Go ahead.
Yeah,
what did you say?
I don't know. I guess in my experience, maybe just have them talk through like basically the situation at hand, kind of just take a step back and observe like what's going on and just walk through it together or discuss it really quick, which it can be kind of hard if they're overreacting, but kind of take into account what's going on in the situation and figure out, sometimes along the way there, you'll figure out like, hey, it's really not that big of a deal as you're making it out to be if you just talk through it with the person.
Yeah. So what they don't want to see when somebody is overreacting, they don't want to see you being dismissive of them. Because what do they think when they see you being dismissive? They think that you're not hearing them. I want to go to Justin real quick. He's got his hand up.
Yeah. So when somebody is like overreacting and everything, and if they're really getting in your face about it, if you realize that you really did actually make a pretty noteworthy mistake or something, maybe they're like blowing it way out of proportion, but if you did make a mistake, own up to that mistake, tell them how you were trying your best and everything. And if you weren't, just kind of, like you said, kind of, deal with it that way. So.
Yeah, that's good. Obviously, if you made a mistake, owning that is a good way of doing it. In fact, even those words work. To say, we used to, when we were kids, we used to say "my bad." That doesn't work at work. Don't say "my bad." That sounds very childish. Say some version of, "Yeah, I take responsibility for that," or "Yeah, I'll own that. That was on me." And then talk about, the next time I will certainly, so on and so forth. So if it was your mistake, that's a good way to do it. A lot of times it's not your mistake. A lot of times they're just overreacting in your presence. And what they want from you, I learned this with my dad, and I think others have learned this with me, is they want to know that you hear them. They want to know that you hear not even necessarily what they're saying, because a lot of times when a leader is overreacting, they start to make all kinds of like extreme edicts and policies that they're really not making. They're just saying like, well, I guess from now on, we're going to have to da-da-da. And I guess from now on, you're going to have to DDD. They do this sort of thing. And if you can hear the root of what they're saying, then you can just speak to them and just say, I hear you. So what I'm hearing from you is this. We'll make sure that we take this seriously, even if it has nothing to do with you. I mean, we had a recent thing, Dwayne's in here from our electrical division. We had a recent thing with lockout tagout with one of our customers. And nothing happened as far as like anybody getting injured on any of our jobs, but because of some people getting injured on some other jobs with this same customer, different contractor, there was a lot of, I'm not going to say overreaction, but there was a lot of reaction, right? And what does everybody want to see? They want to see that you're taking it seriously. They don't want to see you being dismissive, but you don't need to overreact. You just need to react appropriately. So there are times when appropriate response is quick response. And there's a lot of times that appropriate response is thoughtful response. Depends on what it is, right? So sitting back and kind of thinking about that is big. And if you're in the presence of somebody who's an overreactor, give them what they need, which is the ability to be heard by you, that you heard them. You heard the heart of what it was they were saying.
Tell them what they want to hear.
Well, I mean, there's
in a nice way. In a nice way,
Sure, and because it is. I mean, you're right. You are telling them what they want to hear, but you're not being dishonest. I'm not saying be dishonest or disingenuous. But for example, let's say you're a leader of an organization and you come up to me and you say, well, I guess we're going to need to wear arc flash gear in every house we go into from now on, whatever. I guess we just can't hire anybody. I guess we're going to have to fire half our crew because blah, 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 that happened, right? You can say, like, no, I mean, I hear you. We definitely need to be more thoughtful about arc flash. We need to be more thoughtful. And I'm going to work with the team and make sure that we pay closer attention, right? So you're not saying, yes, sir, I'm going to do this ridiculous thing that you just said that you don't actually mean. And you're not saying like, dude, get out of my space. Stop being an idiot. We're doing the best we can. Like you're not doing either of those. You're just saying like, I hear you. People want to be heard. Listening is huge. All right. Let's see what else I got on my list here. Poor work quality. Now I talked about this earlier. This is a big one. It's be very frustrating with coworkers if they're doing poor work quality. And this is where pointing to a standard is huge. As an organization, I suggest that every organization have photos of success. If you want somebody to do something, have pictures of how it should look when it's done, because people can always look at their work and look at the picture and say, does my work look like the picture? And if it doesn't, then it's not good work, right? So I always suggest that everyone do that in an organization. And even if you're not a leader, you can still do that. You can say, hey, when it's done, I want it to look like this. Okay. Like go over some of the key details. You can see, the bends are all 90 degrees. We got our clearances here. You can see, the mastic is taped off. So we got nice straight lines. PVC here, we got proper fall, and all that sort of stuff that they need to see. Okay, we have any questions about that? All right, great. And maybe it needs a checklist, maybe it doesn't, but you're being very thorough about that. And so people who have poor workmanship, if you haven't communicated appropriately with them, you can't expect them to perform good work, which is why at Kalos, we have this thing called Slack, which is a team communication tool. And we like everybody to post pictures of their work. So that way we can talk about it. And it doesn't need to be this giant critique fest. It usually isn't. It's very rare that there's a negative comment, but it just builds a consensus about what acceptable work looks like. So it's a good habit, and that's how you overcome that. Now, obviously, if you're a person who does poor work, well, just do better work. I mean, I did some of the worst looking change outs you've ever seen in your life when I started Kalos, and it wasn't because I wanted to do bad work. It's because I was just really bad at it. And the thing was, I didn't think I was. I didn't know I was. And there's a lot of people out there like that. So don't be too down on people who do what you think is terrible work or they're just awful. They can get there. A lot of times they just need some guidance. Just to be, no, that doesn't look good. Here's what you need to do. And good teachers are specific. They don't say, man, that looks like crap. Well, what looks like crap? Don't say people's work looks like crap. Explain what is unacceptable about their work in detail. Be specific. Be detailed about what could be done differently with their work. But also don't keep, like we already talked about, don't be a micromanager. Don't keep stepping in every step of the way and interrupting them. Give them a shot at doing it. And then if they got to redo it, they got to redo it, right? I mean, that's just how it goes. I understand we're always so busy that sometimes it feels like we're not going to have time to redo anything. But good organizations give time for training. Training costs you one way or another. And in good organizations, it costs sometimes people have to redo their work. And that's okay. That's a sign of a good organization when people are made to redo their work and not made a big dramatic mess about it. It's just how it goes. Chilled Guy says, turn it into an opportunity to learn and better yourself. That is exactly right. Everything is an opportunity to learn and better yourself. Every conflict you overcome, every new opportunity to work with a difficult person, every new job that you screwed up royally and you learned 50 different lessons. You can learn and better yourself, or you can become bitter. And it's the old saying, you can be better or you can be bitter. I try to stay away from the cheesy sayings, but it is very true. Everything bad that happens to you, you can make you better. It can make you bitter. Sometimes a little bit of both, but try to work more towards the better side, less towards the bitter side. Sales focus. I bring this one up because this comes a lot in the residential world. A lot of people are critical of organizations that have a sales focus. Don't look at whether a company is sales focused, service focused, whatever. Look at the results. Are you serving customers well? Do you take care of their problems? Are you being honest with customers? At the end of the day, is the organization delivering on their promises? Because if they are, then don't be the type of person who worries about how much money you're charging, because everything in the world has cheap and has expensive, and it's okay if you work for a company that's expensive. It's fine. And we're not the most expensive, by the way, because there's a lot of people imagine when I'm saying this that like we're a sales focused organization, and we're actually not. We're definitely not on the really salesy side of things. And there are companies that do it wrong, and they are dishonest, and they do take advantage of situations, and they don't do good quality work. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that don't get focused on just sales being the problem. It all comes down to, are you keeping your promises? Are you keeping your word to your customer? Are you delivering on what you promised you would deliver? If you're doing that, then it's okay if you employ a lot of salesmen and charge a lot for the products that you sell. I wouldn't be concerned about that, as long as you're making a good living, obviously. I mean, if you're working for a company where the sales guys are raking it in and you're not making anything, well, then, that's something to consider. Poor mouthing. This is another one. I've caught myself doing it as an owner. After a while, being an owner can wear you down, and you start poor mouthing. Well, if we made better margins, then I could blah, 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 blah. So as a leader, don't do that. It's bad. It's not helpful. It just demoralizes everyone. But if you work for an organization where leadership poor mouths, then I would have conversations about it. If you work in an organization where somebody's poor mouthing, then just ask them, hey, I would be interested in kind of seeing how this all works sometime. Most good organizations are going to be pretty transparent about that. I mean, they may not show you like everything in the books, but they're going to show you like at least how a job breaks down and how that all works out. A good organization is going to be willing to do that with you. And I think when you see that, you will come away with a better understanding, but then also it will help them not be so whiny. Again, it is annoying. Like I see it. Like, it's like when you see the Wall Street folks complaining about, all the things that are going on with the shorting and everything. Like, well, it's not fair. The market wasn't supposed to work this way. It's like, I mean, come on, you've been playing the game this whole time, and now you're going to complain when the average Joe does. This sort of stuff is super irritating. So I get why it's irritating when you have bosses and leadership who poor mouth. And I think it's okay to communicate that. Like, hey, it's kind of demoralizing when you talk to me about, how things are bad and profits and all that. Just tell me, instead, I would rather you be transparent about the specifics if you need to be, but instead just lead, what needs to happen in order to fix the problem. Leadership solves that. So And I've certainly been, I've certainly done that where I have poor mouths and it isn't helpful. Unsafe. We'll put that into, poor quality, everything else. Obviously, if you're working in an unsafe workplace, there's a lot of unsafe practices in our trade. So don't throw stones unless you have some experience, because there's unsafe, and then there's legitimately unsafe, and then there are educated risks. And we all take educated risks to get in our car and drive down the street every day. It drives me crazy when people wear hard hats in cases where there's literally no possibility that anything's going to fall on your head, and they like make that the standard. Real safety is about actually assessing risk and working to actively mitigate it. If you're working in places where people are expecting you to take consistently unsafe actions, then you need to address that immediately and with clarity. Don't pull any punches on that. Be really, really clear. Don't need a personal attack, but you need to say, look, I can't work under this circumstance. I'm not going to climb that ladder again. It's not safe. We can do it in a safe way, and we need to do it in a safe way, and maybe make a suggestion about how it can be done safely, because everything can be done safely, or at least with the risks appropriately assessed and mitigated is what I should say. Go ahead, Corey.
Oh, no, I accidentally tapped the.
Okay. I thought you were going to say like,
Sorry.
you're always making me climb on roofs with giant holes in it. And I don't know, something.
No, I wear safety glasses, so I'm safe for
You're good.
everything.
Yeah. No matter what. It's just safety glasses, steel-toed shoes, and hard hat. As long as you wear those three things at all times, you'll be safe, of course, and carry a fire extinguisher with you. Makes it hard to climb ladders, but you have to carry it with both hands. 2 points of contact on the fire extinguisher at all times.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, I think we talked about most of it. I mean, there's the whole like category, and we're going to do a separate episode with this. I'm going to bring Jesse back, and we're going to talk about communicating with employers about pay and compensation, bonuses, all that sort of thing. Corey, you're unmuted again. Somebody's talking to you. It's really awkward. So we're going to talk about that separately, because that is another thing. If you feel like your employer isn't compensating you fairly, or you feel like you were promised something that you haven't gotten, those sorts of things, that there's a whole toolbox for that that we'll talk about another time. If any of you have any questions or anything that you want to bring up now's a good time. If you're in Zoom, you can raise your hand. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and do that. I did want to announce about the symposium. The third annual symposium is now happening at the end of February 2022. So for those of you who want to get your tickets, they are on sale now. Just go to hvacrschool.com/symposium, or you can just go to the events tab at the top of HVAC School and download that. Download that. What am I talking about? Look up the tickets for the symposium. It's going to be a good time. We already have some committed speakers. Jason Objut from ESCO is going to come down. A lot of you know Jason. He hasn't been at the symposium before, but he's going to talk about the new refrigerant changes, because there are some new ones. 410A is going away, folks. So he's going to talk a little bit about that, and he's going to talk about A2L refrigerants, so mildly flammable refrigerants, and what that's going to look like for us as technicians. We've already got commitments from Jim Bergman and Bill Spone, and John Ellis is already committed to come back. So a lot of our best speakers from last year and previous years are going to be back. It's going to be a packed house, and those 200 tickets are already going fast. So if you want to be at the symposium in person, it'll be fairly unlimited on the virtual side, and it will be better. Those of you who attended virtually this year, thank you for your support. We did have some technical issues. A lot of it had to do with our internet speed at our offices, but we now have fiber at the offices. Yes. So we're going to be able to do a lot more high quality streaming. We're going to have better quality cameras and active managed cameras and all that. So for those of you who are interested in the very inexpensive, very reasonably priced virtual ticket, that will be a great bargain. But the in-person is going to be a blast. We're going to have a good time. It's going to be all the same great people that we've always had. Oh, we also have a commitment for that. Trevor Matthews is intending to come down and speak as well on the refrigeration side. So we're going to have a lot of different topics covered this year. I want to try to get the advanced refrigeration fellows down. I want to see if we can get Chris Stevens to come. I'm talking to some of those folks. I'm sure I'm going to be able to get Craig Migliaccio to come back from AC Service Tech because he really loved it last year. Yeah, it's going to be a really good time. So if you want to come to like a training event where you get lots of great training, but you also just meet a lot of really cool people who are excited about our industry and who have also had a lot of success in our industry, it will be a great place to come. So any of you who want to come, tell your friends, that sort of thing. Tickets are on sale now. One person said AMG 2000. I want to go ahead and just finish off with any questions here. He says, I've wondered how you would handle leaving a workplace due to multiple legitimate tough coworkers. How do you handle a conversation with a future employer without looking like you're soft? I don't think you have to even bring it up. Like, you don't want to be the type of person who goes into an interview and says a bunch of negative things about previous jobs. Just don't do that. Focus on the future. If they ask you the question of why you left the last place, then you can always say something that's pretty vague, like, it wasn't a fit for me there. I'm looking for the next opportunity, and I think your company might be it. Focus on the future, focus on them. You're going to get good jobs and have good opportunities if you focus on the people that you're interviewing with and worrying a lot less about your past. They have to see you as part of their organization. They actually don't care that much about what's happened in your past. As long as you're going to help them move forward, then you're going to have a really good shot at getting a good job with somebody else. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Let's see here. Somebody's talking about blacklisting a customer. That's a good conversation to have sometime. Not really. 2023 is when they're starting to phase out 410A. So yes, it is coming very soon. Are you doing any online class this year? This is how I do online classes. I'm not planning on doing a instructor-led structured course anytime soon. We are going to build out some mini courses on the site that are just like little online courses that provide certificates, mostly for companies that want to give their techs some kind of steps, some completion points that they can make towards their education. I've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of exciting stuff. I'm working on a book now actively. Would be my first independent book. I wrote the one or amended the one with Jim on evacuation that you can buy at True Tech Tools, but that'd be the first book that I've written. Also, the new app MECPIC, MECHPIC is out. It's still in beta, so we're still doing a lot of testing. We have some improvements that'll be coming out next week. And the whole idea of MECPIC is you can share images, trade images with attribution on them, meaning your name gets put on it so people can just share it widely. But then you can also tag it. So you can find really abstract photos that you've taken of certain problems easily and others' photos very easily, as well as we're adding comments now. So you can, kind of ask questions and interact with one another. It's a little different flow on the comments. So if you use it, you'll kind of catch on to how that works. But that is called MECPIC. It's free, and it's just designed for sharing really good images and being able to use them for training. If you're teaching somebody, you want to show them what something looks like in the field. It's kind of hard to find that on Facebook and Instagram sometimes. It doesn't, like, you search keywords and the right thing doesn't come up. But because MECPIC is built around tagging and markup on the images, it makes that a little bit easier. So check that out if you have not already. What's the top 3 characteristics you look for in your techs? What makes them the best and reliable in your eyes? Number one characteristic for anybody, not just techs, is, do they want to work? People who want to work. People who want money, but they don't really want to work and they just want to kind of figure out a way to make money, they don't work. And you know the difference. Like, some of us actually enjoy working. We would rather work than not work. If given a choice between working and not working, we would still work. We might do different kind of work. We might not do as much of it, but we still like working. We like doing productive things all day, going a place, doing productive things. And so people who like to do that do a lot better as workers. I like people who are very resourceful, meaning that they are not always looking to somebody else for everything. They actually like to self-learn. They like to find resources and find answers to problems. They're problem solvers, natural problem solvers, which goes along with being resourceful. And then the other part that's super important is low ego. So not putting themselves out there and how they feel about themselves as the most important thing. I know some amazing technicians who are really high ego, and I know some amazing technicians who are really low ego, and inevitably the low ego techs always are more productive at team building. So you can actually build a team around low ego techs. If you look at one of our commercial divisions, Eric Vinson, very low ego, which is why he's super effective at training people. We have Christian down in South Florida, same thing. Tony McKay up in Jacksonville, very low ego. So you can build around people like that. Eric Melly, very low ego. Where people with ego, they end up driving people away from them because it becomes about them. So those are some things that I always think about. All right, we are at 8. That is it. Thank you so much for the thoughtful questions. Thanks for listening to me just ramble on for 2 hours straight. It means a lot that you're willing to listen and that you care enough about yourself that you want to advance. It's very nice to see that there are so many people interested in growing in their careers. And 170, 180 of you throughout most of this. That's pretty cool. It's very flattering, and I definitely appreciate it. So. If you haven't been on the website in a long time, hvacrschool.com. The HVAC School app is free. The symposium is coming up, and the MECPIC app. Those are all things I would suggest that you take a look at if you want to. But if not, either way, we will be here again. At least I intend to. We've been doing it pretty consistently. Next Tuesday, 6 to 8, covering a topic similar to this. Maybe not super technical, but we try to talk about things that just kind of help you advance as a person and technician. All right. Thank you so much. God bless. Stay safe. We will talk soon.